And go figure that the New Testament actually deepens our understanding of this commandment in a really awesome way. In Colossians 1:15, Paul makes a statement about Jesus, and this statement is amazing. Okay, he writes this. He says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation." This is a verse that I like because it's easy to just read this and see it as we're reading our Bibles and just be like, oh yeah, cool, and just keep reading. But this verse alone, just those simple words, they are just jam-packed with meaning. See, but for our purposes today, though, I want us to focus on just the first part of that verse, okay? Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Because that phrase, again, the firstborn of all creation, it sparks some considerable debate and controversy. That's we're going to focus on the first part eventually, but about that last part of Jesus being the firstborn of all creation. You know, some have attempted to interpret this to mean that Jesus was God the Father's first creation, and then afterwards everything else was created by or through Jesus. And if we were to take this verse to mean that, Jesus would be a created being and he wouldn't be equal to the Father. He would not be eternal either because he would have a beginning. However, in this context, the term, the Greek word that's used there is prototokos, which refers to the firstborn, meaning in supremacy or priority. That's what that phrase is actually meaning. And so this word firstborn can also mean highest ranking. And we see it used all across the New Testament in this manner. We see it like in Romans 8:29, Colossians 1:18, Hebrews 1:6, Revelation 1:5. So the point here is that Jesus is the greatest over all creation. So he's not a created being, but rather with the Greek word that's used there, he's the most supreme. He is the creator. But again, back to the first part of that verse. Thank you for letting me take a little bit of a rabbit trail there. But back to the first part of that verse, it's telling us that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Remember, the second commandment, which is what we're focusing on today, it prohibits making images of God. Yet here, Paul is saying that Jesus is the image of God. So what's going on? It's that Jesus isn't a human-made image of God. He is God made visible. He is, as the author of Hebrews puts it in chapter 1, in the first part of verse 3, the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature. See, in Jesus, we see the ultimate fulfillment of God's desire to reveal himself to us. And that's why it breaks my heart, actually breaks it, when I hear people make those build-to-God statements. The Jesus I follow is this, or the God that I follow is blank. Because the beauty of the Bible, the beauty of this commandment is that God is telling us that we don't need carved images, or we don't need a different kind of mental construct of what we think God might be like. We don't have to say the Jesus that I follow is blank. This is telling us what he's like. Jesus said in John 14, verse 9, "Whoever has seen me has seen the Father." See, you may not have made this connection before, but this verse, if you've seen me, then you've seen the Father. That verse alone is fulfilling the second commandment in a way that the original hearers, the original Israelites, could have never imagined. We still don't make images of God. Instead, we look to Jesus, who shows us exactly what God is like. And how should we respond? Well, we should respond in worship. We should respond in awe. We should respond in drawing closer to him. In fact, here's a concept. We don't need to, quote unquote, imagine what God is like or create mental pictures to help us connect with him. Instead, we can look to Jesus. We can study his words, his actions in the Gospels. We can see his character revealed all throughout Scripture, Old Testament and New Testament. And we can relate to him as a person, not as an impersonal force or feeling distant, like kind of off in the ether somewhere, but as Jesus, who's fully God and fully man, who lived among us, who knows our struggles, and who loves us enough to die for us. And the response, again, worship. In fact, Jesus affirms the spiritual nature of true worship. In John 4:24, he tells the Samaritan woman, "God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." See, that just echoes the heart of the second commandment. Our worship isn't tied to physical representations, but it's a spiritual reality that's based on God's truth. See, because Jesus, he didn't just free us from the punishment of sin. He freed us from the power of idols over our hearts, and he shows us the Father in a way that no idol ever could. And in so doing, he satisfies our deepest longings and frees us from that build a God mindset.